Okay, great stuff. Okay, so let me just officially welcome you, as there are more people joining, to selling to large organizations is complicated. Here's how to simplify, strategize, win more, and win bigger. So this is a particular subject matter that has been close to my heart for a very long time, and one that I've done extensive amounts of work on with a number of different companies. The purpose of today is really to give you as much help and support when it comes to selling to large organizations, but from a point of view of what we've seen work, right? What we know works, and what are some of the common challenges. We've got about 12 or so people on the call, so what I'm going to say is if we could wait to the end for questions. And yeah, I mean, I'll probably go for about 35 minutes, something like that, and then we can have a chat at the end. So, but I'm very happy to take any and all questions as they come up. So, here's what I'm interested in. Could you just pop in the chat for me? What sort of industry are you in? What sort of industry are you working in? If you don't mind popping that in the chat. Nicholas, welcome. So digital health, okay, stuff, okay, that's good. Facilities management and hospitality, done a lot of work in facilities management, Kunal, but it applies to all of this consulting. Okay, cool, good. So what we're going to talk about today is, and tech, okay, applies to any B2B selling situation, right? Particularly complex sales, which I'll define a little bit later. Bit of background to us. So we are Transform to Perform. We specialize in helping businesses accelerate revenue performance, typically through training, coaching, and advisory work with organizations. I'll talk to you maybe a little bit more about how we do that in just a second. Here's an example. Here are some of the companies that we have worked with. What I would say is that many of these companies, we have actually worked very closely with them and been involved in their selling situations. We don't get in front of their clients, but we help them with the strategic nature of their pursuits. So we teach them a way to think strategically around their selling situations, and then we help them apply it. And we do that through the lens of real life selling situations. So we've done that with KPMG, with JLL, been with many of these organizations, Standard Chartered Bank, I mean, for a lot of these organizations for quite some time. What that does is it gives us a really in-depth understanding of some of the common challenges that businesses, individual contributors, sales teams face when they are selling to other businesses, and the complexity that surrounds that. These are large organizations that we work with. What I would say is that we work with smaller organizations as well. So don't be too intimidated if you think your organization is not as big as any of these. I'll tell you this now, we are happy to work with any organization where we can make a real difference. And that's our key criteria. Okay, all right, so I want to ask, in fact, I'm going to do this as a poll. So you may have heard the expression before that selling is a combination of art and science. Let me just launch this poll. Right, can you see the poll? Fitri, can you see the poll? Or give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, I'd like to get your take. What do you think? Is it more art, more science? Is it both? Tell me what you think. Right, 9 of 13, so 10 of 13. I can't see who's responded, but I can see 11 of 13, 12 of 13. I'll just give it 10 more seconds, see if somebody wants to respond. Okay, let me end the poll and share the results. Fitri, can you see the results? Let me just double check.
Yeah, you can see it.
So interesting, and I think this is a common theme that I find is that still today, lots of people feel that sales is mostly art, and let's get a little bit more specific around that. I'm just gonna get rid of these get rid of the results because we can talk to it anyway. So art is the skill side of stuff, right? It's tactics, it's questioning, it's value articulation. It's typically how you show up in front of the client. It is the client engagement piece. The science side of things is process, strategy, frameworks, and systematization. Both are equally as important. And I mean, it's a subjective question as to where you think the emphasis should be. If you want my view, I think if your process, strategy, frameworks, and systematization are strong, it places less need for skills, but skills are still required. Don't get me wrong. Okay, so I think the leaning is towards science, and it's not about technology, right? It's not about technology. It's more about the way we think from a strategic point of view. And that leads us into this next slide, which is we call the sales system. I'm not going to go long on this, but I always like to use this with anyone that we're speaking to for the first time, just to frame up what's going on in the sales or anyone's sales organization. Now, first things first is that every revenue generating organization has a sales system, and it consists typically of 4 major client management activities. So we need to generate demand, whether that's from new clients or from existing clients. When we do that, we need to qualify opportunities, but then we need to manage those opportunities. And that's the bit we're talking about today, right? Is the opportunity management piece. Yeah. When we are managing opportunities, we need to meet with the client and have conversations with them. And we need to do good discovery work. We need to be able to articulate our differentiation and all of that sort of stuff, right? And then when we secure the client, we then have to manage that relationship over time, and that is another strategic piece as well. One that we also do a webinar on, which is you can find on our YouTube channel if you want to go get there. But the point I want to make about this is that all of these things are interconnected, and our belief from experience of working with clients and doing this with clients is that as you start to see your sales organization as a series of interconnected activities, and as you start to optimize what you do within those individual spaces, there is inherent growth that lies in the sales system. And why this is important now is because we get we have conversations with leaders who say to us, things are more challenging, and even though things are more challenging right now, the growth targets don't change. There's a perceived gap between where they think their people are in terms of sales acumen or sales competency and what they need to be able to achieve the objectives in this current environment. This is the answer, right? Is optimizing what you do in terms of all these activities. The other side, not the other side, but there's another layer to this as well, which is sales leadership. So in terms of sales leadership, these are the orange circles, right? What are the things that sales leaders need to be thinking about? Well, mindset, right? Do our people have the right mindset? Are they showing up and are they doing just the bare minimum? In other words, quiet quitting, or are they giving their discretionary effort? Funnel management. So managing the store of your current opportunities in play, forecasting, and again, hugely important for various different reasons for different organizations, right? And then coaching. Interestingly, there was some statistics from a Harvard Business Review study the other day. I'm just trying to remember what they were. That businesses that have a coaching culture tend to perform 19% better than most other organizations. So even just in that alone, you can start to see, right, that there are opportunities to optimize what you do across your sales system. So if you are a sales leader and you're here today, right, I mean, doesn't matter whether you choose outside help or whether you try and do it yourself, just putting a focus on these individual areas can help you improve. Okay, so selling to large organizations is complicated. I'm going to launch the second and the last poll because I have a question here. And the question is this, in fact, I'll just let this poll come up. Let me see if I can launch it. Can I launch it? Hang on a second. Go back. It won't let me launch it. Why won't it let me launch it? Petrie, can you launch that poll for me? Are you able to do that? For some reason it's not allowing me to do it.
Okay.
It's the first one.
Okay, the decision maker.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so the question is, in B2B selling, on average, how many decision makers do you think are involved in a buying decision? 3, 5, 7, or 9? I'd love to get your insight on this. Let me know. We've got 15 people here. All right, so I've got 6 of 15, 7 of 15, 8 of 9 of 15, 12 of 15. Let's give it 10 more seconds in case there are some people who are not necessarily comfortable to answer. 5, 4, oh, it's 13 and 15, 14 and 15. Can we get a 15? Do we have 50? I feel like an auctioneer. Okay, I'm going to close now. Okay, let me just show the results. So 36% said 3, 36% said 5, 29% said 7. No one said 9. Good. Okay, so let me give you the answer. What makes selling to organizations complicated? It is the sheer number of people involved in the decision-making process. It is not how complex your solution is. It is not how complex the client's problem is, both of which can be complicated, don't get me wrong. But the selling situation specifically, the complexity is determined by the number of people involved. And the number of decision makers involved in the decision-making process is 6.7 is the average. Now that number comes from an organization called CSO Insights, who I've been very close to for a number of years. And they have tracked this number since I mean way back in the noughties, right? And it has consistently been increasing over time, particularly actually since the GFC, the global financial crisis, as just typically businesses have tended to get more wanting more control over decision making. So when buyers are asked how many decision makers were involved, oh sorry, there's an important point here as well, right? This is a particular view. When buyers are asked how many people, decision makers, so when decision makers are asked how many decision makers are involved in their buying process, they say 6.7. Okay. When you ask the same question to sellers, and this is quite interesting because that's probably more reflected in our poll that we've got here, they say 4.5. Here's a question. I don't know if anybody wants to come off mute or pop something in the in the chat here. What's the problem here? If decision makers are saying on average there's 7, but sellers are saying on average there's 4.5, what's the problem for us here? Or what's the impact of the problem? Pop your answer in the chat or come off mute if you wish. Or remain silent. Bhavik, you're saying consensus building. Hey, Bhavik, by the way, it's been a while since we spoke. Seller and buyer have completely different perspectives. Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah. See if there's any more answers. Okay, all right. Let me help you here. So here's the problem. Okay, the problem is that if we don't identify all of the decision makers involved in the decision making process. Oh, sorry, Nav, you just said not all stakeholders involved in decision making leading to support the team later. Yeah, okay, that's getting closer. Okay, if we don't identify all the decision makers involved in the decision making process, we are at risk across the opportunity. And what I will say is that very often when we are working with clients on their selling situations, I will frequently come across situations where they, you know, the selling team will say, well, we've met 2 people. They're the only people involved in the decision-making process. And after further examination, you start to peel back the layers. They've missed a bunch. I will say this. I mean, having done this for about 10 years now, looking at clients' opportunities, I have never come across an opportunity where I've done a review where we haven't uncovered at least one decision maker that was missing. Never come across this. Okay. So enterprise selling is getting more complicated, not less. Sellers don't identify all the decision makers. Let me just stop sharing the results of the poll now. Sorry, let me just get rid of that. And the problem here is that the risk increases, right? And you could have people that you have not identified that are advocates, neutral, against you, supporting a competitor. And typically as well, in fact, let me ask this as a question. From your point of view of thinking about salespeople, if the average is 6.7 and salespeople think there's 4.5, then we're missing 2 people. Do you think those 2 people are more senior or more junior in terms of decision makers? Pop your answer in the chat. Yeah. Okay, so a couple of people said senior. You're absolutely, well, I mean, I'm going to say you're absolutely correct, because sometimes it's not an absolute, right? But that typically tends to be the case, right? They tend to be more senior people because salespeople may be struggling to access those people. So this is one of the biggest challenges of modern day sales team faces, is being able to access these people, these more senior people. And not identifying all the decision makers is the biggest strategic reason for losing opportunities. So what can we do about it? Because that's what we're here for, because there is a solution. And the difference is this, right? In fact, let me go back on this. Anybody want to come off mute? And I've got a question. What's the difference between strategy and tactics? Anybody want to be brave enough to come off mute? Or you could put it in the chat as well. What's the difference between strategy and tactics?
I think, Mark, if I would differentiate, strategies is probably a plan that involves different tactics. Tactics is a particular situation that you handle, but strategy is having the backup plans and having throughout a plan for it.
Good, great, Kunal, thank you. And there's more. So Bhavik says long-term versus short-term. Anybody else want to add?
Hi, Mark, if I can add here.
Yes.
You're able to hear, right? Okay. So usually in the discovery call itself, it is better for us to ask the prospect, typically for this kind of solution that we are offering in the past, if they have implemented similar solution, what was the process like, and who were the decision makers involved in the process, so that you get the idea about, like, what you can foresee in the future steps whenever you align or interact in the future conversations with them.
So there's so much, Nav, I like about your response there. I mean, I love the fact that you've got a discovery step in your process. I love the questions that you're asking as well, because all of that speaks to just good. And when I say salesmanship, that always sounds a bit cynical, doesn't it? But just good professional salesmanship. So absolutely. And Kader says in the Sheriff says in the chat, strategy is set of process and key objective. Tactics is getting the strategy work towards our plans. Yep. Okay. Good. Okay. I'm gonna get a little bit tighter on this for you, because I think everything that you're saying is correct. But here's what I want you to think. Right. Strategy is how you set yourself up for the game. Right. Sporting analogies work really well here. Doesn't matter what the sport is. How do you set up for the game versus what happens during the game is tactics. So if you think of strategy as that kind of 35,000 feet aerial view, right, and you're looking down on the situation, in our case, it's a selling situation, it's a pursuit, yeah, and you're asking the question, what are my positions of advantage and what are my positions of disadvantage? Ultimately, my objective is, how do I get the right salesperson in front of the right buyer with the right message at the right time? Yep. There's no exact science to this. You don't get it right all the time, but that's the question that we are trying to answer. Tactics are typically the skills and the situation that we manage when we're in front of the customer. Strategy is taking a step back, looking at the selling situation and figuring out who's who in the zoo here. What do they think about us? Is anybody advocating us? Can we leverage any of this? And there's a whole world of data that we need to take into consideration when we are thinking about selling situations. And I can tell you now, when people start to think like this, and I'm going to be blatantly honest. In fact, this is my next slide as well. I'll be blatantly honest, right? B2B sellers still think too tactically and not strategically enough. In fact, let me put that out as a question, because I'm interested in your take on this. Do you agree or disagree with me, or neutral on this particular assertion that I'm making here? What do you think? Just pop that in the chat. Agree, disagree, or neutral?
Can I do it
Yeah.
this way? Just
Yeah, Mike.
I was fortunate enough to go to Harvard and do a strategy course several years back, and I think you've nailed it. Harvard, what they say is strategy is how you compete to maximize your profitability. Tactical is all of the different bits and pieces that you're going to do to achieve that aim. And I think it's very similar to what you've done there.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Much appreciate those comments. That's very comforting to know.
You don't have to go to Harvard now.
Yeah. I've saved myself several hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, so Cornell somewhat agrees. Okay, so here's the thing, right? The selling situation becomes complex, because I've used this word a few times, when there are 3 or more people involved in the decision-making process, which by pure definition, if you subscribe to the research at the front of this webinar of 6.7, it pretty much makes most B2B selling situations complex. Many sellers assume much lower number, again, as substantiated by that research, the impact of which can be the difference between winning and losing. Today's B2B sellers, even if we think too tactically, I think there would never be any harm in thinking more strategically about our selling situations. So how do we simplify the complicated situation? I don't know if anyone has ever heard the expression, how do you eat an elephant? I've used this a few times, well, many times actually, in this part of the world, and nobody seems to know this phrase. But anyway, how do you eat an elephant? You break it into small chunks, smaller digestible chunks. By the way, we are not advocating eating elephants at all, right? It's more of a term of expression. And the way we believe this needs to be done, okay, thanks, Heidi. The way we think this needs to be done is by specifically using an opportunity management framework. Now, there's a couple out there. Wouldn't surprise you to know that we have one. I wouldn't particularly care which one. Well, actually, I would want people to use ours. But the point is, right, using a framework to bring your all this information together. It's like a checklist on steroids, right? And I want to illustrate an issue that happened in a client of ours business. So we've changed the name here just to, obviously, for client sensitivities. So this is what happens when you don't cover the bases. So let me just take you through this story quickly. So consulting business, big existing client of theirs comes to market with a new opportunity, okay? My client's business get all excited. However, what they did not know is that the relationship manager for the client had a serious fallout with a very senior decision maker on the client side. So they did not know this, but they knew about the opportunity. They pulled in the who's who in terms of their partners, a very expensive team of people put together in order to run this pursuit. And they put this solution together. And I tell you, no word of a lie, they were so happy with the solution that they had created for the client. They started launching the solution on social media before they'd even presented it to the client. It was only towards the back end of the selling the sales process and the buying process that they started to get wind of the fact that they had no idea that this relationship manager, there was some kind of acrimony between the two. And what had been happening, they also discovered, is that the competitor had been cozying up to this decision maker as a, well, not as a consequence, but it was opportunistically because of the space that had been left by the relationship manager. Anyway, come the pitch day, the high influence decision maker who had fallen out with the relationship manager did not show for the pitch. By the way, pitch is one of my least favorite words. The other decision makers who there were really lukewarm. Okay, unsurprisingly, they did not win. This was an existing client. Now, you think of the impact of that, right? Well, because I'm going to show you. Here's what happened. The estimated cost of the pursuit was 2 million because they did not track the perception, right, of the decision makers and how they saw them. The consequences are, I mean, they're unfathomable, right? But I mean, if you think about this, right, there's the misdiagnosis, which means this stuff repeats. When I asked the person that told me the story, we'll call him Simon for the sake of argument. When I asked the person this story, I said, so how often does this happen? This is what he said. Oh, all the time. I mean, I was just flabbergasted, right? So the blame fell on the wrong people. The blame fell on the people who designed the solution, and it was not their fault at all. People, they didn't in the end lose their jobs, but their reputation, their credibility was under threat. The loss of morale. That's not even calculating the competitor encroachment that now is existing within that relationship. I mean, you can go on and the list is endless here, right? The consequential loss, you know, incalculable and not uncalculable costs is significant. And so this can be avoided. And it can be avoided. Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. First of all, we can start to talk about desirability and winnability. Well, first of all, right, the cost of putting a pursuit together is significant, right? Time, salaries, emotional exertion, opportunity cost of what else you could be doing is huge. So qualification is important, and you cannot qualify opportunities without information. Typically, what happens when it comes to the qualification of process is that we decide that we want it and then we go for it without much calculation as to whether it is winnable or not. And I can tell you now, there are plenty of opportunities that I want to win, but I know that I can't. And so we need some kind of objective way of doing that. So not all opportunities are winnable. You need to understand both the relationship between winnability and desirability, and this is basic qualification. Here's what I would say. And again, this is just another one of those things. Whenever I ask client questions, I say, so do you have a go no go process or any kind of qualification process when it comes to opportunities? I would say the most common answer I get to that question is a wry smile to one another, and then some kind of comment that reflects the fact that, yeah, we've got one, but we never use it. Yet if you think of the cost, right, of pursuing opportunities with low win probability, but if you think of the cost of the opportunity cost of, you know, what else you could be doing with that time, it's never going to be an exact science. You're never going to filter everything out that you lose, right? But you could significantly improve your win rates just by having not even a complex qualification process, a 5-question qualification process. Anyway, I get quite passionate about these things. So here's the thing, here's one of the main points I want to make today, right? If you want to compete in B2B sales today, and you are not using a specific framework to manage opportunities, you have a competitive disadvantage because there are other businesses out there that do. There are other businesses out there that have a process and a tool around reviewing opportunities that enables them to think more strategically. And as a consequence, their actions are more targeted. I'm going to show you a little bit how we do that. So now okay. So think of so the people calling from Singapore, you'll probably get this more than most, right? So if you think about national service, right, your military background, but you don't need to have done that in order to know this, right? But imagine you're a military commander and you're overlooking the field of battle, right? What's important to you is as much information as possible for you to build out the map of the territory. And if you are missing information, or its information is inaccurate, then that could cost lives. I mean, if we were a platoon here, and I said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to go and take that hill over there, and you said, well, do we know where the enemy is? And we said, well, we think they're actually over there, not over there. Probably wouldn't have a huge amount of confidence in that. Now, we're always missing information. There is no such thing as perfect information, don't get me wrong, but I can tell you now, when we start to think about these things through the lens of a framework, we find more things out. And actually, one of the biggest findings when we teach this to people is that people know what they don't know very quickly. Let me say that again. They know what they don't know very quickly. So all we're doing here is just figuring out, how do we know what we know and how do we know what we don't know? And there are kind of three critical elements to this, right? For a successful sales strategy. What is your position? Who are the people involved? And what is your plan? So this is our opportunity framework. Let me just take this. This is just the broad strokes, right? I don't want to go into this too much depth, right? But do we understand the opportunity fundamentals? Have we qualified the opportunity? Do we have any idea who we are competing against? And by the way, competition is not just the other team, the other companies. It's also, we could be competing against doing nothing. We could be competing against budget allocation. We could be competing against self-perform, doing it themselves, as well as the other guys. So there are different forms of competition. Do we know who's who in the zoo from a decision maker point of view? Do we have any internal stakeholders that we need to manage? What's our strategic assessment based on the information that we know or don't know? And what's our action? And everything that we do, whenever you are using a tool like this, is all about how does it drive to action. We don't want analysis paralysis. We want to be able to know quickly, what do we know, what do we not know, and then go to action. And these things are living documents, right? Oh, it's not even a document, it's a living framework. You know, you update it every so often. Once you've got some new information, and you cycle back around the process. It takes about 10-15 minutes, something like that, if that. But here's what we're looking for, right? Position. Okay, so what is your position in this opportunity regarding where they are in the buying process? Here's a free tip for you. Okay, free tip. First question you should ask when you are coming into a selling situation, whether you're just revisiting it, you're coming back to it because you've been working on other things, is where are they in the buying process? Because aligning to the buying process is fundamental and key, right, to you being able to align with their thinking. A lot of the time, we enter their buying process late. In fact, research tells us that it's almost 60% of the buying process has been completed by the time most salespeople are called into the selling situation. Other things we need to think about, right? Competition, alternatives. What are the other alternatives that they're considering? How do they perceive us against their buying criteria, against the ability to solve their particular issue? So position, things to think about, right? People, who are the decision makers, okay? And what do we understand about them in terms of who they are? Can we access any of them? Who's missing? What's their role in the buying process? Is there a priority that they have for taking buying action? You could have some people in your decision-making process that don't think we need to do anything at all. Why are we doing anything? This is not a big enough issue. We've got other things we need to deal with. Where are all the high degree of influence decision makers? And do you have any advocates or anti-sponsors? And I can tell you now, I would, with the amount, you know, I don't know, I mean, hundreds, maybe thousands of opportunities I see every year from clients, I would say one of the biggest issues that I observe when I see them using this tool is the lack of advocacy that exists across an opportunity, i.e. we don't have enough people advocating us, we aren't differentiated enough. And then finally, what's the plan? Okay, so do we need to identify missing information? Do we understand who our internal stakeholders? Do we know what our strategic vulnerabilities are? How do we provide additional value through insights and perspective? I mean, this I mean, this may sound like a lot of work, but I can tell you the extra and it's not normally, right, when you actually do it, but the extra investment in doing this kind of exercise, particularly across your major opportunities, is, I mean, if you increase your win rate by 10%, then that's the investment, that's the ROI. But let's talk about ROI specifically, right? So I can't remember who was in facilities management, but this is a client of ours, and I can't tell you the name, obviously, but this is a leading facilities management business, actually the world's largest. Might have given it away there. We were working with them, and the main issue was there was a drop in sales performance. They thought there was going to be more. So what we did is we launched our particular framework with the training and coaching across the Asia Pacific region, 6 countries, 130 people in total, and this was the impact it had. So when they did an analysis of deals with and without the opportunity pursuit plan. Deals without, 23.9% was the win rate. Deals with, 46%. Margin also increased as well by I can't remember what the amount was, but it was about 1%, something like that. So there was an increase in margin. Now, don't forget, we just took a snapshot, and that snapshot was about 12 months after we'd started with this. The exponential effect of this year on year afterwards, we haven't taken this snapshot since, okay? But I believe margin is on an uptrend. Can't tell you what the numbers are. But in terms of what this meant for them, in terms of additional revenue, for their business, the APAC business, it was about 26 million. So the ROI was huge as far as this was concerned. So what's my point here? My point here is that if you start to get more strategic, and if you start to use a framework and you use it well, you execute well across it, then the potential for creating additional growth in your business, the potential for improving your metrics, the potential for qualifying out those low probability win opportunities, yeah, and therefore focusing on opportunities you've got more chance of winning, there's an exponential, potentially exponential return on that. Final thoughts, okay, and then we'll take some questions. So our view, it will always be our view, and I appreciate, obviously, this is what we do, so take it as you will, is we believe you need to get teams organized across a common methodology and language around sales. And in fact, very often when people come to us, this is one of the things that they ask for. We need a common language around sales. We need more process around sales. We need a methodology. If depending on the size of your sales organization, and I can go long on this particular slide here, but I'm not going to, right? If you think about your top, splitting your sales organization into your top 20%, your middle 60, and your bottom 20. Your top 20%, if you try and move them, then you will never get as much return as if you could move the middle 60%. And so you can see here, 5% increase across the middle 60%, okay, is over 70% more revenue than an increase across the 10%. Now, of course, it depends on how many people you've got in your team. If you've got a team of 5 people, this may not necessarily be as relevant. However, okay, there is some real interesting thinking that sits behind this. And we think that most salespeople need to think more strategically so that the way you sell becomes a competitive advantage, not a disadvantage. And the key is to get more, I'm going to use this word now, and it might be a scary word for some people, is just to get more systematized, more process, not process for process sake, process to create behaviors, right? Process disappears on the other once it becomes behavioral. Getting people thinking more strategically, and as I mentioned, the return on investment on just this part of the sales system alone is exponential. All right, that's it. Thank you for listening. I don't know how many people have we got on the call now. Let me just double check. A few. Got 18. Okay, we've got 18 people. What feedback do you have for us? I'd love to hear your comments or questions. Who wants to kick us off?
Hi, Mark. Kunal here.
Hey, Kunal.
First of all, thank you very much for organizing this and giving us the perspective which you have been kind enough to share with us a lot more times. Coincidentally, the example that you gave of our facility management thing, I was part of it when all that happened. I was part of that training.
Oh, were you there?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
did I have to apologize?
No.
Okay.
I was part of it. I think what you mentioned was absolutely right. It really had an impact on the sales team and my team as well when we looked at it. Understanding the customer, understanding the EBIs, and understanding what all we learned in that. I think a good perspective that today I think I would gather from this is strategy and the tactics part that you've very precisely mentioned, and how do we ensure that we strike the right chord. So
I'm embarrassed I did not pick your name out, Kunal. So please forgive me.
that's fine.
And thank you. And thank you for validating what we've said here today. Are you still there? Are you still? I won't mention the company name.
No, I am still in the industry, but I work with Sodexo right now.
Are you at Sodexo? Okay.
It
All
was
right.
done 2 years back when I was with IFS. Yeah.
Now you've given the name away. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Never mind.
it's fine. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So
Kunal,
thank you
for
very
those
much
comments.
for that. I look forward for sessions like this, which I am happy to be part of always. Thank you
We'll
very
keep
much.
inviting you. Yeah, absolutely. Team, what I would say is those were completely unsponsored comments.
Definitely, I would say that, because I was, I can very well correlate with that. So that's why I thought of mentioning it and validating it rather, because you were a little hesitant to take the name, which you are not supposed to. So that's fine. But
Thank you.
thank you very much for that.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Mark, Sharif here.
Hey, Sharif.
Okay.
Please don't tell me you were there as well.
Yeah, I was totally, totally having a different understanding on the topics what we are discussing here. My assumption was I involved in a lot of M&A, deal structuring, and acquisitions. I was thinking how to sell a large, sell a small organization to a large organization. 5 million to a 500 million, 5 million to 100 million deal. So I was looking from that perspective, but totally today dimension is actually on how to sell to a large organization, something, like a sales pitch.
well, so think of it like this, right? Because this is absolutely relevant. Remember, whatever you're selling, the small company simply becomes the product in that moment, in that selling situation, right? So when you're selling that small company to a PE firm or whatever it is, another business, whatever it might be, there are still decision makers involved in that decision making
the
process.
first session which we are talking about decision makers, the differences between the buyer and the seller, it has a lot of relevances, like I was able to have the insights of it. Basically, like some of the deals, what we did, we have some people in the middle who play the art of statistics to find what is the expectation from the seller, what is the expectation from the buyer, then penetrate those information and make it workable. So now if I ask you another question, so what is the tools and techniques you can recommend for us to track these sales effectively? Do you have anything in place for us to do or deploy?
The tools in place to track what, sorry?
The sales of this, like the framework, the sales, the strategies, like some of the methodology to track those bridges, pipes, and opportunities, like some kind of a ready-made SaaS tools available in the market.
Well, I mean, we have a framework ourselves, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. It's not a SaaS tool. Again, we subscribe to technology being an important part of sales, but actually, when I was on a podcast this morning saying this, this is a little contrarian. My point here is a little contrarian, right? So forgive me. I think there's too much focus on on tech in sales, because we walk into companies all the time that have got a whole range of tech tools but yet their capabilities and competency when it comes to selling to organizations is shallow at best. So it's not about SaaS tools per se, it's about how you structure your thinking. A SaaS tool cannot do strategic thinking for you.
Right, I agree. Because if in case of our situation, right, we were a 25 million group in 2018 and 19. Now we are almost a 25 million group. We do a lot of acquisitions, M&As, we have footprints across the globe. So we run the company on the own brands instead of we rebadging, rebranding, and bringing it to a bigger umbrella. We see the performance of the unit, and then finally we take decisions on how to, marry these entities together. So for us, becomes a challenge to have independent tools across the board.
Independent?
So we are independent, different tools by the entity itself. We don't have a common tools actually to track the companies in the US, company in the Middle East, company in the Far East.
Yeah.
So the collaboration becomes a challenge even for a technology company.
Absolutely, but I mean, again, it depends. Whatever you're trying to achieve here, you're trying to get a decision from somebody to decide on something, right? You're trying to get them to buy X, Y, Z or invest X, Y, Z. Correct?
That's important. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, and then there will be different people with different perspectives that are contributing to that decision in the buying organization. Is that correct?
Right. Exactly. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
And typically, the bigger the decision, the more people involved.
Yeah. Yes. Naturally.
That's the biggest issue that any organization faces, or any selling organization faces, is tracking those people, right? Because if you don't track them, you can't get to them. And a common situation or common challenge we find leaders saying to us is our people just cannot access more senior decision makers. Well, you've got to be able to figure out who they are first of all before you can access them. And then once you know who they are, and you start to develop a bit of understanding about, what outcomes are they looking to achieve? Maybe even you can get down to understanding a little bit about their personal motivators. That's going a little bit deep for now, right? But then all of a sudden you can start to figure out a way strategically of how you get in front of these people that would typically be more challenging to get in front of. And I know it because I've done this countless times. I do this now. I sell, I consult. We do it now. In fact, I'll share a quick story just very quickly. There was one senior leader in one organization. It's a bank. I did a lot of work with this organization for about 4 or 5 years. And that senior leader, it took me 6 months to get a meeting with him. 6 months. But I continually worked at it and knew exactly, retrospectively, I knew exactly what I was doing. What was I doing? I was building the confidence and credibility of the individual who was the gateway to that person. They were the gatekeeper. And as a consequence, once that person felt not just comfortable enough, but bringing me in front of this leader was going to be of value to them, then we had that meeting, and it turned out he was one of the nicest blokes in the world. And then we won a whole bunch of business as a consequence of that. And he's actually, I can actually WhatsApp him anytime I like. He's a lovely guy.
Thanks a lot.
Anyway.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I just
Welcome.
want to end here with just a final note. One challenge what we faced, in previous deployments, right? So the top-down model actually fails a lot. The bottom-up model actually succeeds a lot when we want to sell something to somebody, right? A visionary person sitting on the C level, he wants to roll out things. We need to get the support from the stakeholders. That is where some cases we failed actually. Some of the cases we go to the middle layer and then try to approach the C levels, then probably the success rate is very high. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
No problem. No problem, Sharif. Thanks for your comments. Any other questions, team?
Hi, Mark. Here's Heidi.
Hey, Heidi. How are you?
Hi. Good. Thanks. I just wanted to thank you for the presentation, because I think the process that you speak of is so critically important. And you mentioned it earlier. I think there's a lot of it, is about the process. And I think what you pointed out is really cool. And then a lot of this stuff needs to be implemented to really come to life. So the structure does not determine the rigidity. It's not rigid, but it is something where the team can really start to embrace it, and they can bring it into their everyday, and they know how to work the structure in order for them to grow, in order for their sales to grow. And that whole coaching aspect to it, I think is critical. So it's more comment than anything else. But I just wanted to appreciate, because I know it works. I know this is exactly what organizations need, and there is not enough of that in most organizations. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Heidi, thank you. Your comments are very generous as always, but thank you. Thank you. I just saw Nav, you had a question. Let me just read this out so I'll read it as I'm thinking. So thanks for sharing the insights, Mark. A question. For large enterprises, how do you align with other stakeholders who are not involved in the conversations to ensure better win rate?
Yeah, hi, Mark. So just a context to that, if you can extend. So one of the case study that you shared where they failed to understand there was some acrimony from the relationship manager with the team, and they went through the entire process and they end up in losing the deal, right? Probably this may not be a situation in each of the prospects or deal that we work on, but yes, there is a likelihood of that. And another data point that you shared earlier, if the 6.5, the decision makers are involved, but the salespeople, they end up in reaching out to only 4.5, you end up in losing out those senior level who are the key decision makers, whether to approve those deals or not, right? How, if you were there, how would you ensure that this would have succeeded, or how, from your point of view, what differently you would have done in the case study that you shared earlier?
Oh, I mean, okay, what would I have done in the case study? Okay, first of all, I mean, I would have mapped out the decision makers beforehand, and just in doing that, you would have picked up the fact that there was a decision maker. Well, potentially you would have picked that up, right? Because there was a decision maker who had a view on us. Let's say it was us, was the selling company, right? Okay, had a view on us that was not helpful to us. Okay, so first of all, you would have picked that up, and that then would have led you in a different direction. Maybe you'd have investigated a little bit more. Maybe you'd have tried to, if you had enough time, maybe you'd have tried to build that bridge. But you certainly wouldn't have spent £2 million on putting the elite team together and the best solution and all of that sort of stuff, if you felt that somebody was going to scupper that for you, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
So that's the first thing. I mean, it's the most challenging part of what we do, right? In B2B sales is getting to the key decision makers. And here's what I am not saying, right? What I am not saying is that in every single selling situation, do you have to get to every decision maker to win?
Exactly.
That's not a realistic thing to say. What I am saying is that if you have decision makers that you haven't got to, you are at risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are at risk, and it is incumbent upon us as salespeople to at least know what we don't know. Because if it comes down to forecasting, you think about forecasting from that point of view of the case study. Somebody got carried away with their own solution. They get carried away with, how great the solution was, and because they're not reading the selling situation because they don't have the information to hand. Yeah, they're forecasting that deal.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then and we all know the issues with forecasting. I mean, what I will tell you, just an interesting stat, and then I'll be quiet, is that it's only 46% of forecasted deals close. Not 46% of deals, 46% of deals we think are going to win, less than half. That in and of itself is also a problem. Does that answer your question, Nav?
Yes, Mark. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime. Any other questions? We've got somebody coming late to the party. Any other questions? All right. Well, I tend to take silence as rapturous applause. So I'm going to take my rapturous applause by way of your silence, and then I'm going to close the meeting, unless there are any particular questions. I'll give it one last time. Okay, thank you very much for your time. What I will do is I will send to everybody who attended here the ebook that accompanies this, and if you want, I can send you a link of the YouTube when we put this out as well. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not already. I think most of you probably will be, but if you're not, and if you've ever got any questions or you need some advice and guidance on specific opportunities, let me know. I'm very happy to help. But we'll be in touch in due course, and watch out for the next webinar. Hope this was helpful. Be well, stay safe. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.